we work with energy providers like electric and gas utilities to help them communicate to customers exactly what they can expect to pay when making clean energy decisions. So that could be changing to a new time of use rate, which charges you different prices for electricity based on the times of day that you use it. It could be buying an electric vehicle, the cost implications of that beyond just buying the car, but also charging the car at certain times of the day, installing solar, storage, whatever clean energy decision a person might make, we can tell them exactly with great accuracy what that's going to cost them on their bill. And why this is important is because utilities are striving to do a couple things. One is decarbonize their operations, so remove the harmful carbon to the environment from electricity generation, and they're also tasked with providing a really good customer experience. And ultimately, I think if they can do a better job of conveying to people the cost impact of their decisions, then they can both decarbonize because they're shifting usage at different times of the day when supply is cleanest, and they're also ultimately getting happier customers because there's no surprises on their bills.
When you talk to somebody who's, again, not in the industry and they hear what it is you do, is the common person surprised to know that peak time matters on that regard? Are they surprised by that, or is that something that they know but they haven't taken any action on to learn about or to change behavior?
Yeah, I think they're becoming less surprised because more utilities are rolling out these different rate structures to them. And I think there's less surprise about the fact that it is happening. And I think there is some sense of relief that there is help to figure out their best course of action. Obviously, if you go to different parts of the country, it may be a bit more of a foreign concept. A lot of the rates and modern rate structures have kind of, started in California and moved, in different states. So I think it depends on where you are. But for the most part, when I tell people this, they're like, oh, yeah, my utility just switched me to a new rate, a few months ago, and I was not quite sure what that would mean for me. So there's, I think, definitely a general acceptance and understanding of what's going on, but there still is that kind of confusion around, the cost impacts to them based on their behaviors.
Yeah, it sounds like there's more sort of rapid adoption in the areas where there's sort of extremities of weather, right? Like is that where you're seeing a lot of the uptick in this so far?
Yeah, I think extremities in weather, and I think also influx in renewables and some of the more progressive utilities that were some of the first to announce these decarbonization targets, or states where there's a hefty amount of renewables in their electricity supply. So, states like California, Arizona that have a lot of solar, they're definitely seeing some more of that. And obviously, weather plays a role as well.
Yeah. So when you do talk to somebody who knows what GridX does and they've been using it, like what is it that they appreciate about the technology? What is it that sort of hooks them in the beginning? What's the feedback they get after I've been involved with the brand?
Yeah, I think a couple things. We have very happy customers, which is fantastic, and that makes my job as a marketer a little bit easier. And that a lot of our sales generate from word of mouth, or customers are willing to espouse the benefits of working with us, which is great. I think a couple things. One is the accuracy of our solutions, so we can pinpoint real close to what the price is going to be, which is a complex thing, which kind of leads me to the next point, which is that we really simplify that. So whereas a lot of these calculations have been done manually, it might take 9 to 12 months to roll out, a TOU rate, for instance, or an EV program, we can shrink that into a matter of weeks. So I think that speed to market is also something that people really get excited about because they want to get these types of programs, these types of products in the hands of customers as quickly as possible. And if it takes, 9 to 12 to 18 months to do that, they're missing valuable opportunities to both, shift that usage and to, provide that customer experience. So I'd say it really boils down to the accuracy of our solutions, as well as the our ability to really be efficient and to kind of speed the time to market to getting these kinds of things out the door.
Do you see a lot of you talked about having happy customers? That's really important. Do you
Yep.
see that they're sort of championing it to their industry friends as well? Or are they passing that along?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's one of the cool things about working in the utility space is, we serve investor-owned utilities in regulated markets, and so they're not competitive with each other, right? They're not competing for us as customers. I live in the Bay Area, and PG&E is my utility, and that's who I get my energy from. So, they're as a result really open to idea sharing, to information sharing. You go to these conferences, and people are sharing ideas on what they've done, how it's been successful, the technology that they use. And you just don't see that in a lot of other spaces in, highly competitive markets where people are willing to kind of give away their secret sauce, so to speak. And, what I found is there's like a lot of really smart, innovative people working in utilities that want to share those experiences. And in part because they're all very mission driven, they're in service to customers. They provide a very valuable service, and they're very focused on doing better for the environment. And I think the more that they can talk about what they're doing, the better off they're going to be. In fact, I recently started a podcast called With Great Power, where we interview utility practitioners on a variety of topics about, programs they've run that have been successful, ways they've engaged customers, big changes they've made. And they're always just so open and willing to share their insights and share their thoughts. And I think that's one reason, again, why I love being in this space, is just because it's a real free flow exchange of ideas that happens all the time.
It is a rarity. I mean, there's just not that many industries that's the case. And like you said, you mentioned why that is. Like they're not competitive with each other,
Yep.
so they don't need to hold things close to the vest. And then by the way, they're trying to accomplish things that are good for everybody, right?
Yeah, that's
So,
exactly right.
but I mean, think about how much of an obstacle that would be if they were competitive, right? Like they would
Yep.
hold, would they share it? Who knows? You don't know if they would, but they do. So yeah, that's gotta just for you personally, probably when you're talking with them and going to conferences, doing podcast interviews, like everybody can just kind of breathe easy because you're all trying to accomplish the same thing versus, did I share too much,
Yep. No one's trying to steal ideas. No one's trying to, single source on vendors, or, not hold their secret sauce too tight to their vest. So yeah, it makes for a real fun collegial experience. And, I've worked in different sectors before, and, you go to these energy trade shows, and it's a very collegial group of people, and it just, creates a really strong vibe, which I enjoy.
On the same time, at the same time, when you are competitive, sometimes it drives innovation, right? And you have to really level up on different things. Marketing is one of them, right? So
Yep.
how have you, in your role in an industry that I think it's fair to say has not always been looked at as the forefront at marketing, right? Like how have you brought that into this industry, and like what's the reception? What have you tried to do? Have there been any hurdles in front of you, or just things that you're proud that you've accomplished so far?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I think I really tried to develop marketing strategies and campaigns that are going to seek to educate and inspire people to take action. And, even if they don't buy our product, if, we can plant some good seeds of inspiration, of how things can be done, and I think that's a positive. In terms of innovation, I think the podcast is a great example of a storytelling device, especially coming from a vendor. There's a lot of vendor podcasts out there that, are kind of subtly trying to promote themselves as opposed to kind of learn from and share ideas from others, which is exactly what we're trying to do. I think that's a big part of it. The other thing that we do, at events, we really try and provide real strong experiences for people, both kind of on the show floor, and outside of events as well. So I'm not afraid to throw a really good party to show people a good time, and I think it goes back to that bringing people together to network and to share ideas and such, and to get to know each other. In the past too, I've also had a lot of success developing kind of an executive advisory board where we bring people into the fold to kind of show them our roadmap, the kinds of things we're working on, to have dialogues about innovation and what we can do together to move the industry forward, and also to bring outside perspectives in as well. So bring in different thought leaders, maybe from different spaces that we can learn from. And again, it kind of goes back to the idea of educating, inspiring, collaborating. And we've done a lot of different things, both at GridX and in my career previously, with an aim towards doing that. And they've always been really well received. So that's a real positive. And I'm really proud of the fact I joined GridX back in February of 2022. And, marketing had been kind of a desk side job up until that point. There was no dedicated function. So people knew of GridX, but it was more so kind of the install customer base and other folks that had kind of heard of the company. But as we're going to more and more events now, people are saying GridX, I feel like I'm seeing you guys everywhere. And so I feel like the combination of that content development, of those kinds of experiential events and such is really starting to move the needle, and it's getting people to really understand who we are and our value proposition, which as a marketer, that's exactly what you want to see, right? If you go to events, no one knows who you are, then maybe you're not doing your job as effectively as you should be. So that's been a real positive experience for us as well.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. I mean, you're doing a great job with the brand, and people take notice
Yep.
when someone's going to do that. I mean, especially if there isn't, if you look around and not as many people are taking the same kind of actions that you're taking, you're you're kind of showing off in a space, and people are
Yep.
taking notice. So
Yep.
I'm sure that is rewarding. What I'm sure occasionally you run into sort of misconceptions that either your customers or your customers have. You see a lot of that. My guess is that a lot of this is like behavioral change stuff that you're dealing with, and how do you motivate people to make a decision that they probably would agree with, they just don't want to do. But are
Yep.
there misconceptions in the space too that you're also trying to deal with?
I think there's misconceptions, that, well, you mentioned one of them earlier, that utilities aren't innovative, which frankly, I always scoff at because, they've created one of the single biggest systems that have made our way of life possible, the electricity grid. We all have an expectation that when we flip the light switch, the light goes on, and it does like 99.9% of the time, right? So that's innovation right there. Obviously, as the industry changes, more renewables come on the grid, there's some big, lofty challenges in terms of how do we integrate those, and how do we ensure that supply meets demand and whatnot. But I think that's a big misconception, that utilities just aren't that innovative, and I think that's frankly silly. And they're getting even more innovative now over time. I think the other misconception is, and I struggle with this one a little bit, I do think people care about the environment and energy and how their actions do influence that. I think we're seeing a lot more of that, especially as the climate change discussion is becoming much more prevalent. I think people do want to make decisions that impact them in a positive manner, but also, impact the job of the utility and what they're trying to do. And I think a great example of that is there was a massive heat wave out here in California, and Southern California and Northern California, the whole state really, back over Labor Day weekend. And there was like a week where temperatures were above 100 degrees, as high as like 108 and 110. And when that happens, the system's going to struggle because everyone's running their air conditioners. And Southern California Edison sent out or I think it was the state of California, but in SCE's territory, set out like one of those emergency alerts via text saying, hey, we need you to cycle down your AC during this time or everyone's going to lose power. And they saw a tremendous response from that, and they were able to avoid a blackout as a result. So even though people were going to be inconvenienced a little bit, maybe be a little bit warmer in their home during a very, very hot time, they responded in mass to prevent that system from going down, so that people who really couldn't afford to have their AC running for whatever reason, or their lights off, it kept the system up and it kept it stable, which I think was just a fantastic example of how people do want to make decisions for the greater good, and do that with regards to energy.
That's cool. I've read that energy is the only currency, and I tend to agree with that statement. But it's also it's like you said, we take it for granted. You turn on the
Yep.
light switch and you expect it to be on. So it's this almost invisible thing that we don't pay attention to unless you work in the industry. But now we're seeing that it's one of the biggest opportunities we can to make an impact, more so than some CPG brand that changes its packaging or something like that, which is
Yeah. Right.
important.
Yep.
But on what scale of importance is that? So I think that's, for me personally, is one of the reasons why I enjoy talking to people like yourself who are doing something in the space where it's like, oh, this totally makes sense. It's just something that maybe we took for granted before or hadn't thought
Yep.
about before until someone is like bringing it to our attention, which is what marketing does, right? So
Yep. Exactly right.
you're putting it out in front of people and making sure they understand what the possibility is, and trying to influence behavior changes and adoption and things like that.
Yep.
Are you seeing ways where either companies or even individual residents are starting to make switches and things like that? I mean, you kind of mentioned one right now where everybody chipped in and said, okay, yeah, we'll participate in this as a group. Are you seeing other instances of that where it's effective, or people have been able to influence change and behavior
Yeah,
change?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think electric vehicles are a good example. Obviously they're sleek, cool cars for the most part, but we're starting to see some pretty significant adoption of those, not just in the coastal states, but throughout the country. And so I think utilities play an important role in the EV experience, both helping customers, find the right car for them, but then also how it's going to impact, their energy bills going forward. So I think EV adoption has been really good. I've seen a lot of customer or a lot of utilities do really great work serving limited income customers as well, and really kind of being there for them during difficult times. I recently interviewed a woman, Tara Sievers, at Entergy, which is a utility on the Gulf Coast, and they also experienced similar heat waves recently, and it was having a really profound impact on their limited income population. And so they made a series of bold moves that really helped alleviate the financial burden on them, because at that point they're sitting there thinking, am I going to buy groceries this week, or am I going to pay for my energy bill? And like, frankly, that's not a choice that I think anybody should really have to be faced with. So there's lots of really great examples, I think, of how utilities are doing good work to better serve customers and to change their behaviors.
That's awesome. You've mentioned a couple of things, but what would you say has been the most rewarding part of joining since you've joined GridX? Like what's been most rewarding to you so far?
The most rewarding thing for me so far, it's a good question. I think just being part of a really strong mission-driven team, so as I mentioned before, GridX has been around for about 10 years, but never really had marketing. And this is a company doing some phenomenal work for some really important companies. And they weren't really getting, I think, as much of the recognition or just as much of the recognition as they probably should have. And so I think being able to shine a light on that is great. And it's one of the reasons I'm in this space, is because it is a very mission driven company. People join because they want to do great work, but because they care about the environment as well. And so I think being able to shine a light on that has been really fantastic and very rewarding for me. We're growing the team like crazy right now, which is great. We took a pretty significant investment from a bunch of investors back in the spring timeframe, and just being able to put that money to good use by hiring more people and doing creative campaigns and fixing some things that needs to be fixed has just been a really cool experience. And this is so personally, this is my first time, on an executive team. So kind of like being part of the C level. And I think being able to see it from that perspective has been really cool. And to know you're part of a small group of people within a very large company that can have a strong impact has just been a phenomenal experience for me. So I'm really enjoying it so far.
That's awesome. Is there something that you wish that the general public was more aware of with the work that you do or the space that you're in? Is there something that you think that people, and maybe they know it, but they just don't think about it very often? Is there anything like that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think that their behaviors and what they do can have a pretty profound impact. I think people might think to themselves, well, if I make this change, I save $5 on my energy bill, not that big of a deal. But that $5 to you could mean a lot for others in terms of system reliability, keeping the lights on, and just helping utilities achieve their decarbonization goals. So by buying that EV, for instance, sure, it's a great car that goes really fast, but you're also having a really positive impact on the environment. And the more of those we can get on the road, the more gas cars we get off the road, the more we're going to do in order to combat climate change, which I think we all play a role in. So I think for me, it's just that these actions, which may seem small or big, because obviously an EV is a big purchase, like they definitely have an impact on what we're trying to achieve from a planetary standpoint, in terms of ensuring we're leaving a good place for our kids, grandkids, their kids, and so on.
I had never really thought about the externalities of buying an EV beyond, just the impact of the EV itself. But if I look around at people I know or people in my neighborhood, the ones who buy the EV are more likely to have solar, are probably
Yep.
more likely to think about their usage. Do I charge this at night? As an example, things like that. And it's all started with, like you said, it probably started with the car, right? Like it
Yep.
it probably didn't think about usage at night until they had the car, and then they started thinking about, how do I fuel this thing, and is my garage a gas station with my solar panels, like that type of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, a lot of people buy it. Well, obviously the early adopters, will buy it because they want something that's sleek and new, but a lot of people are buying it now to save money on gas. I mean, we've seen the gas prices go through the roof, so they're making a, financially conscious decision that really has an impact on the environment as well. So yeah, there certainly are a lot of residual benefits from doing things like that, or installing solar, to your point, that has a huge impact as well in terms of just lessen our dependence upon carbon in our electricity supply.